Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Robins on the Wire, a Bristol Live podcast covering all things Bristol City. I think the last few weeks have been quite positive on this podcast. 3 wins on the spin, optimism looking up towards the playoffs. And then in a way that every football fan will know too well, it's all felt like it's come crashing down a little bit in the last few days. So to cheer us up, I've got Jack on the call as usual. Jack, how are you, mate? Back from Spain, back into the greys of Bristol?
Yeah, thankfully not back to Stoke after Spain, because that obviously went pretty poorly, but managed to get to Ashton Gate Tuesday night, which was not quite as bad, I guess, scoreline-wise, but still not a great performance. I think we're just struggling so much with injuries. I'm going to throw out the excuse already, as I've seen some people calling it on Twitter. I think it's perfectly acceptable. I actually reckon we've got more of our best 11 out than we have in at the moment, personally.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to be a big topic of conversation. I think that's going to be our main talking point, isn't it, today, around the injury situation. But we will just touch on, I'm not going to go over Stoke, to be quite honest. It's nearly a week ago. It was really bad, wasn't it? I don't think we need to say much more. Really bad day. And, Struber and Rob Dickey, I think the press post-match, they were very clear that it was a case of, right, go and produce a reaction against Blackburn. And to be quite honest, it wasn't, was it? I've seen a few people suggesting it was worse than Stoke. I think that's probably, from my point of view, a case of where it was more frustrating, granted, because it was a more winnable game and City didn't do enough. But it wasn't just as flat as I've seen a performance, not necessarily even the atmosphere, Jack, but as flat a performance I've seen for Bristol City for probably best part of a year or so.
Yeah, we just didn't ever really get going, did we? The first sort of 25 minutes, it felt very reminiscent of the Southampton game just 2 weeks earlier. Sort of Blackburn all over us, couldn't really get out our own half. But we were all like, okay, there's no real cause for concern. Yeah, it wasn't like they were getting consistent shots away and stuff like that. It was almost identical to the opening phases of those Southampton games, or that Southampton game, sorry. And then we just it just kind of stayed like that, didn't it, for pretty much 90 minutes. Their goal annoyed me because they'd done that exact move and that exact ball about 3 or 4 times without being stopped already in the first half against Neto and then against McCrory once Neto went off. And it was literally the exact same piece of play. And it was always going to end up in a goal at some point because there were, I think, 2 occasions where Vitek had to get down to it and sort of push it away or kick it away. And this time he didn't, and it was tapped in at the back post by Hashi.
Yeah, and it was like, I don't know about where you sat, but it was one of those where the board goes up, and I think whenever you see like 8 minutes, then you kind of had that thinking of, right, okay, let's go in. If you get something before the break, what's a bad half suddenly turns into a really good smash and grab half, and instead, like you said, it was the same move, wasn't it? Roberts steps out, and it happened twice, didn't it? Where he's got spun, and he's desperately trying to foul the bloke. He's like, you can see he's grabbing for some shot and can't get near him, and then I think it was Viner, didn't he? Went to ground, and the Blackburn player quite just kind of evaded the tackle without even looking like he was really trying to. It looked like something off FIFA, when you press slide tackle and someone just goes flying past and you just stop. And then it's a good cross and like good positioning for the finish. He gets right between Tanner and Dickey to kind of get that space. Bad goal to concede. And then, the second half, I actually thought for 10 minutes or so in the second half, it had that feeling of those nights you've seen at Ashton Gate where, the crowd get up, the players respond, you're starting to pile on that pressure. But in terms of chances, I can think of the Dickey header from a corner that narrowly went wide of the post and McCrory's header that landed on the roof of the net that, to be quite honest, I think he should have done better with. I think he almost had more time than he realised. But other than that, nothing really of note, was there?
No, I mean, no shots on target says it all. I think Anis Mehmeti's post-match interview for the club, if you haven't listened to it and you're listening to the podcast, then definitely go and listen to it on social. It was very, very interesting and very open and honest, to the point where he was actually almost disagreeing at points with the interviewer, saying, they haven't been good enough, they haven't created chances, they need to do better. He was going all the way back to the Birmingham game where, we won 1-0, but it still wasn't a very good or convincing performance. There were a lot of shaky moments that we did well to defend. And then obviously, he's owning up to the fact that as much as these injuries are obviously impacting us, the front threes are starting front three. And if they're not creating chances for anyone or themselves, then that's almost a problem in its own right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the concern, isn't it? You actually look at that front three, barring the change between Armstrong and Reece that's happened over the last few weeks. It's the same trio every league game this season. Twine and Mehmeti have started every week. I do think this is when you get into the quite interesting debate I'm sure we'll get onto later about injuries is, I guess in an ideal world, they wouldn't be playing the best part of 90 minutes every week, would they? I was chatting to someone yesterday and I said, when you actually think about Scott Twine's last few seasons, I doubt he's played full 90s this consistently for a long time. Last season he had no pre-season and was in and out of the team in the first half of the campaign. Season before, he was obviously at Hull where, he was playing quite regularly, but not necessarily in the position he'd want. And then he comes to City where he gets injured straight away. I think it's easy, isn't it, to think, oh, well, they've been playing every week. They should be up to speed now. Equally, they're probably feeling the effects a little bit as well because they're playing more than they have to. Like you say, they just think, I quite like Scott Twine, and I thought, I think he was one of those where maybe the stats were slightly unkind to him on Tuesday, ever so slightly.
Yeah,
I know people see 15 duels lost or whatever it was on FOTMob and go, oh my God, what's he done? And he was a bit too soft and went to ground a bit too easily.
Yeah.
Equally, he was the one trying to carve something out at times, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. But I think it's the same old issue I have with Scott Twine sometimes. As brilliant as a footballer as he is, you almost get one brilliant game like that Southampton one, and then 2 or 3 not so good ones. And it's like he's lacking that consistency. And you can say that about 99% of Championship players, because if they were consistent, they'd probably be playing in the Premier League. But the one that really frustrated me, I think it was the back end of the first half. We unleashed him down the right, and the ball was kind of bouncing up, and he left the ball and ran into the Blackburn player looking for a foul, and it obviously didn't get given because the Blackburn player was just running alongside him, and he backed into him, went down looking for a free kick in a decent position. It's Scott Twine, so you like to think you get a good ball in or whatever from there. But it's times like that frustrate me, where I'm like, just go to the ball and stick with the chance we've already got, because when you don't need to look for the foul. It's not like you're on the ball and you've got no options. I didn't get that personally, but yeah, like you say, I think the stats might have been a bit unkind, but equally, it's probably another one of those games where that whole front three didn't quite do enough for me.
Yeah, that's how I felt about the whole team. I'm sure people will disagree with the player ratings I gave. They were considerably higher than at Stoke, but that was almost because I felt it was just a game where every single player was off it. Stoke, there was some genuinely bad performances, I felt, and I'm sure people say the same against Blackburn, but to me it just looked like 1 to 11. Barring Radovic, who I thought was really, really bright again. So Ross McCrory did quite well on both sides. I think what you're getting with him, and he's not actually played that much football recently, and I felt he did exactly what you expect Ross McCrory to do in that situation. I actually thought, and it brings us on to the start of the injury conversation, I thought Neto looked back to his, maybe not best, but considerably better in his 25 minutes than he did at Stoke. And like I said, that takes us on to the fact that he was off. Obviously, it was about 24 minutes in, and then Mark Sykes late on. 2 more names added to the injury list. I guess what was your initial thought, Jack? I think we'll touch on that first. When you look round and realise it's Neto on the floor in the box, and then when you realise it's Sykes off the pitch late on, what was going through your mind?
Just pure frustration. I think even more so when you realise that it was Sykes that came on to replace Neto, and then obviously ended up going off. Well, what was it? About 5 minutes left to play, maybe, and we'd used our 3 stoppages, and only for 3 substitutes, which was interesting. When you've got, I appreciate a lot of the bench was Peckover, Thomas, Morrison, Mearholes was on there as well, I think, wasn't he? But you've got Yu Hirakawa sat down there, who I think probably should have been introduced at some point in the game, maybe alongside Mayulu or alongside Armstrong. Obviously, you wouldn't have brought him on after half an hour when Neto came off. But I appreciate Sykes probably would have still been on the pitch because you wouldn't have subbed him off, but we could have had extra fresh legs in there somewhere. I think that I found that a little bit odd, because I get not throwing in the kids to a game like that 100%, but not throwing on someone like you, who's started for us at times. He started at Sheffield United, didn't he, the first game of the season, and has done quite well this season. I think when he's had the minutes, I found it odd that he wasn't getting introduced at any point. But yeah, just frustration again. It's another 2 added to the list. I think it takes it up to 9 or 10 now, doesn't it? Out of the first team squad, which is just almost unfathomable, really, isn't it, when you're only 3 months into the season.
Yeah, and I was looking at I've got it here, the list, and so I was trying to almost build a team. So let's say you don't have anyone in goal. Max O'Leary missed a large part of the season. There's your goalkeeper. You could probably have Neto at left back, or Neto at left back. Bring McNally Atkinson as your centre backs. Sykes is your right wing back, a 3-man midfielder, Knight, Williams, Bird. Stokes in the 10 with, I don't know, Stokes and Cornick as 2 up top, and you're missing basically one more player, aren't you? You're missing, if any of the forwards have got injured, and Reece has kind of had a couple of knocks, hasn't he? That takes you to what would be not a terrible 11 to be like fielding. Which, I think that there's that sort of talk, isn't there, around, what's going wrong, what's not working. I think, to be quite frank, you're never going to get the answers to that, are you, on the record? Because that's not how football clubs operate. But it is a dire situation, and I think that takes on to, we had press conference this week. We had it on Wednesday. It's a little bit different. This EFL week of action is at St Paul's. I think it's the Leisure Centre Community Centre, and Adam Randall was there getting some much needed extra minutes, playing with the kids in the cages, and Max O'Leary was there as well. It was a great little event. Gerhard Struber was there, and we did press conference there instead of like a big group discussion. It was one-on-one interviews. So the piece has gone live on Bristol Live this morning about sort of the updates, and basically our understanding is that there's a hope that Neto will be in contention. By the sounds of it, that's normally a case of they've had the scan and it might not have been as bad as they worried when they took the precaution. Sykes, we're about, I think Gerhard Struber said it was at least 2 games he's going to miss. So that takes, obviously, tomorrow, Friday night, straight to Watford and Swansea. I guess it's just a blow, isn't it, Jack? Like, it does just feel, I think Gerhard used the phrase Murphy's Law, and that's what it feels like to me. It's like every time, everyone that could get injured is getting injured, and it just seems to be in the areas where you've not necessarily got cover.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, me and my mates who I stand with, we were just in almost disbelief to pick up another 2. It didn't feel possible, almost, but it's just, so frustrating. Especially 2 players like Neto and Sykes who have been a big part of this season as well so far. Neither of them have really missed many games, have they? We've seen that rotation between Sykes and McCrory virtually every game for the last sort of 6 or 7 games, maybe. It's an annoying one, isn't it? But hopefully that 2 weeks or 2 games on Sykes doesn't turn into 4, 5, 6 games, as almost seems to be happening to everyone else.
It's that sort of chicken and egg thing, isn't it? I think we spoke about it off air, and I've had the discussion with 1 or 2 people on social media the last few days of, you feel like they're almost in a cycle at the moment that's not going to break until they get some bodies back, because you've got a situation there where players are fatigued and they're getting injured. Mainly, you'd have to assume if it's muscle injuries, a lot of that will be the result of fatigue. But then, because they're getting fatigued because other players are out injured, and you're in this situation where if Jason Knight had been able to be rested over the last couple of years, maybe he wouldn't have picked up the issue he did with his groin. Similar with like Max Bird, if they'd had Joe Williams back as well, they probably could have reintegrated him even slower. Rob Atkinson, if McNally's fit, he wouldn't have played every game. Even if Cam Pring was fit, him and Neto wouldn't have played the minutes they have. And you're just in this sort of cycle now where you can only see that getting, it sounds awful to say, and I want to be positive, but you can only see that getting worse while people aren't returning, can't you? Because, we mentioned Mehmeti and Swine there, the minutes they've played. Zach Viner now is playing every game and probably running a couple of kilometres extra in midfield than he would have done in defence. Rob Dickey's had injury issues in the past, George Tanner, Ross McCrory's probably going to now have to play both of these 2 games potentially because Mark Sykes is out. And it just feels like that snowball effect, and it doesn't particularly feel like that snowball is going to stop, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think the big concern for me, like you say, is everyone almost is having to play virtually full games because we haven't got that many options to rotate in and out. And I like the fact that he protected Reece, who I actually thought was having a pretty good game, given the sort of circumstances on, was it Tuesday night? I like the fact that he brought him off for Armstrong, who we know has been in pretty good form recently, to make sure that Reece is all right for Friday, because that's another big game. Watford are in decent enough form, aren't they? And like the old cliche, there's no easy game in the Championship by any means. But the players just looked dead on their feet, didn't they? After like 70 minutes, it was the point where you want them to be pushing more and more to try and get that late equaliser, when you want players to be flooding forwards. It didn't look like any of them had the ability to run left, to be honest, because you could just tell they were all absolutely shattered, which is completely understandable, really, given the fact we've had, what is it, 7 games now, 6 games in the last sort of fortnight or so. It is a lot, and most of them have had to play the full 90 for a fair old chunk of those. I can't imagine how Adam Randall's legs are feeling.
Yeah, I don't think he he didn't move much on the five-side courts. I'm sure every Bristol City fan will be happy to note last night he was very much in goal for a lot of it. As was Max O'Leary, which I felt was a bit harsh to be put in goal when you're playing with a bunch of kids. You know, you'd think that'd be his chance to get his run out in midfield or up top. But no, it is a really difficult situation, isn't it? Because I understand. I saw some of the discussion around, okay, we need to throw the youngsters in. You know, if you've not got that depth, trust the youngsters. But equally, I was trying to put myself in Gerhard Struber's shoes, and I was thinking, do you want to do that? If you, I'm not saying this is not me saying he doesn't, but if you don't have necessarily the trust that they're going to come in and, you know, swim rather than sink, do you want to put them in that situation? Because it's easy for us, isn't it, to say, well, Elijah Morrison's the left wing back, he can come in if Neto's out. But equally, if he's going to come in and then really struggle against the Watford team that have been really good at home, it's not an easy decision, is it? Same with Ollie Thomas, same with Leo Peckover. I've seen a lot of people calling for him to start instead of Scott Twine. And you're thinking, I understand why that suggestion emotionally is being made. But when you take that step back and think about the prospect of someone who's never started a championship game of football replacing the club's top goal scorer in a game when they're looking to end a 2-match winless run, that seems a bit, you know, it seems a bit, maybe out with the bathwater to me.
Especially when Twine's not injured either. I think it's a bit like, yeah, all right, he didn't have the best of games on Tuesday night by any stretch. He hasn't had the best of games the last 3 now, I suppose, since that Southampton one. But the only way he's going to end up having a good game is if he carries on playing. And when you haven't got a championship ready, you know, with all due respect to Peckover, I thought he looked good when he came on against Southampton. For the however long it was, he was on like 5 minutes or so. You know, you can only do so much in that time. When you've got a championship proven good player in Scott Twine at this level, and then you've got a youngster who's played about 10 minutes of professional football, I don't understand why, unless you absolutely need to, why that would be the jump from some people. It's baffling to me, because I think Scott Twine needs the chance to bounce back more than anything.
That's almost my feeling, you know, is that you almost can't afford to take any more quality out of this squad, can you? It's the way I almost feel. You know, you're at a point now where this is a squad, like we said, that is already looking like they're playing the back end of games in particular, like a team playing in April. It's got that sort of feeling around, you know, after that, I'm trying to think back to the block last year, you know, when you've got the Good Friday, Easter Monday games. It almost feels a bit like that game at Luton away last year where they look dead on their feet and just don't quite have the ideas. And, you know, like you said it there, it's understandable. It's going to come. We saw similar at Christmas time last year. I remember, was it the 1-0 win over Derby, I think, early January last year?
Yeah.
It was after that run over Christmas. I think Luke McNally scored the winner. And City, it was a bit like the Birmingham game where City weren't particularly good, but battled, dug in, and held on. The advantage then was after that sort of performance, they had to like an extended break. This time, It feels like the games are just coming and coming and coming. And it's only natural that, like, I think I was trying to work out, I think with Hayden Roberts, Gerhard Struber's now used 15 different starters in the Championship this season. But I've only used 15 starters when you've got 10 players sidelined. You know, that's your entire 25-man squad. That's, you know, it could not be stretched much more thinly without, I think we're already nearing crisis. One more injury and you're basically in crisis, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we look at that bench, we literally, being able to make 5 substitutes is wonderful, but we actually only had 4, excluding O'Leary, because unless Vitek got injured in the game, which, to be fair, I had a minor panic about at one point. O'Leary's not going to get subbed on, is he, realistically? You only have 4 senior players down on that bench, and it's Sykes, who has had a very good season so far, I think. Armstrong is obviously in decent form. Maulu, who we haven't seen score for over a year and doesn't look brilliant at the moment, let's say. And then Hirakawa, who we know has been in and out the side at points this season, was sort of when required more than anything. And then you've got the kids who, yeah, they might come on and provide a little bit of a spark or a bit of excitement because it's someone new and it's someone maybe with a fresh idea, but 99% of them, I suspect, are not going to be championship ready, because it's so incredibly rare that you find someone who is ready to just jump straight in at this sort of level that you can only really assume that most of them won't be.
Well, you get the feeling that if they were, they'd have been playing. Don't you? That's
Yeah.
Let's be frank. I don't mean that in a critical way. I think it's wrong to kind of throw them under the bus. But the fact that Elijah Morrison probably didn't play and Hayden Roberts did on at Stoke and on Tuesday night probably shows you at the moment Gerhard Struber thinks Hayden Roberts is a steadier pair of hands and potentially is protecting Morrison a little bit. It's a really difficult situation. He's been very good. I think he's not blamed injuries once. He's been very clear that he is not blaming injuries. But he's obviously frustrated. He's made no secret of that, and I think completely reasonably so, because I think he was there to be frustrated. A little over a week ago when we did pre-match press, and at that point he still had Atkinson, Sykes, and Borges all fully fit. Even if Borges does make the cut on Friday night, he's not going to be 100%. He could do with the rest. And he said it to us yesterday. You've basically got a load of players that are going to have to play on Friday against Watford that in an ideal world would not be playing football. And that almost sums up City's situation, doesn't it? You are running a risk basically every time you step foot on the pitch.
Yeah, 100%. I think we touched on it. I don't remember if it was on or off air last week on the pod, but if you take these 3 games and you have a fully fit midfield, even, it's Adam Randall or Jason Knight, probably more likely actually. And then through each of those 3 games, you could probably go Knight and Randall, Bird and Williams, and then whatever you choose to be your best 2 in one of the 3, whichever way around you want to put it, because they're 4 very good sort of upper level championship midfielders, and none of those duos would be a weak spot. And that's not anything on Zach Viner, but he's not as good in midfield as he is as a defender, because that's his position. That's where he plays. It's
and to that point, even if you're not starting different midfields, let's say he decided, at the start of the season, it was quite clear Jason Knight and Adam Randall almost his first choice, wasn't it? But you've got 60, 70 minutes and you could take one of them off and bring on Max Bird, and suddenly their workload goes from 90 minutes of what is mentally pressing. It's a taxing system they're playing.
Yeah.
So if that's suddenly 60 minutes a game rather than 90, you extrapolate that out over what is a 3-game week. Adam Randall will have played an extra game's worth of minutes probably this week than he would have done had any of the midfielders be fit. And you don't have to be a sports scientist to work out why people are probably getting injured. I guess we've spent a lot of time on that, and I think we'll probably come on to it when we preview Watford. But I do want to talk about a bit more positive. I think I'd call it injury news from I interviewed Gerhard yesterday. His hope, and it is very much a hope at this stage, nothing's set in stone, is that Jason Knight will be fit for Swansea, which is a massive boost. Knocking on the door was the way he put it.
Yeah, that's huge, because that's got to be a big game as well. Swansea are a decent side this season, I think. And it's got to be one of those games. I'm kind of working on the basis that we don't get a lot of Watford, that you need to get back to good form. There's always a little bit of needle when we play Swansea. Obviously, it's local-ish. Not too far over the bridge, and the fans are always well up for it. And you'd like to think that the players will get up for it after a 2-week break, not necessarily a rest period, because I'm sure they'll still be training for the majority of it, but 2 weeks without that match load at least. And hopefully a fit Jason Knight, even if he can only come on for half an hour, to give Viner or Randall a rest in that middle of the park, or even one of the defenders, and you move Viner back, or however it might end up sort of taking shape. But that would be a massive, massive boost. I think it's clear to see realistically that he was our player of the season last year, wasn't he? And I think if you keep him fully fit for the rest of the year, he'll probably end up being in that sort of bracket again this season.
Yeah, you've only got to hear Gerhard Struber talk about him for 2 minutes or so to realise how much he rates him and how integral he thinks he is to his system, which, we can talk about a lot about our opinions of who should play and who shouldn't, and who's a good player and who's not. Let's be honest, the only person whose opinion matters is Gerhard Struber, and it's clear that he thinks. I think, he's never going to pick a favourite, but I imagine Jason Knight's up there, as he was for Liam Manning. He also suggested Campering was close as well. He didn't give quite the same time frame as he did for Jason Knight, but he seemed to suggest that. I think the question I asked, I've got the article here, was very much a case of, we spoke about Sykes, we spoke about Neto, and I pretty much I said he's very honest in interviews, as anyone who's watched any of his stuff will notice. I think I basically said, "Is anyone going to be back for for Friday night?" He said no. Is anyone getting close? He said Jason will be hopefully knocking on the door for Swansea. Cam Pring also, but no one else, was the way he put it. So it suggests that Pring is probably, you've got Knight at the top of the queue of returnees and then Pring a little bit behind, I would assume. Again, that's assumption rather than certainty. Obviously, Sykes you'd probably put in the bracket just below them if it's at least 2 games. Yeah. Josh Stokes, another one, he said he hoped he'd be on the grass. I think is it Portsmouth and Wrexham's 1 week, isn't it?
Yeah.
He hopes that week, which that'd be really positive, wouldn't it, to get him back? I know we've not seen loads of him, but they had high hopes for him this season after a really good loan spell at Cambridge. So if he can get back for that sort of time, could be really good. And then Matt, I guess, to end it on a bit of a slightly sour note, Matt's Bird, by the sounds of it, has had I don't think it sounds like a major setback, but a bit of a setback. So yeah, Gerhard was reluctant to put a time frame on that, but it sounds like he'll be a bit further behind. So I just guess in general, Jack, what are your kind of thoughts on that update?
Having Knight and Pring come back in that sort of, let's say, maybe 2 weeks or so over the international or after the international break will be a massive, massive boost. I think we've really missed Knight for obvious reasons, but I think because we actually didn't end up seeing huge amounts of Cam Pring last time out, he picked up quite a few injuries, sort of smaller length ones, but more of them, if that makes sense, I guess. I remember that one he picked up against Cardiff, ended up keeping him out for a good few weeks, didn't it? And things like that. And we saw he was struggling at the back end of the campaign. Probably shouldn't have played that second leg against Sheffield United in hindsight, but equally we didn't have a whole lot of other options, did we, at the time? How familiar that feels now is quite impressive, actually. But I think that'll be a big boost. And Josh Stokes as well, like you say, we've not seen huge amounts of him in a City shirt, but we know he's a good player. He impressed at Cambridge last year, obviously impressed at Aldershot when we signed him. And it's another one of those where, we've mentioned 2 or 3 times already on this podcast, Mehmeti and Twine probably wouldn't be playing 90-minute weeks normally. If you've got Josh Stokes fit, one of them don't have to each week, because you'd like to think he'd come on in a situation like on Tuesday night when you could tell Twine maybe wasn't really getting into the game, things like that. You could bring him off for the last 25 minutes or so, chuck Josh Stokes on. He might do brilliantly. We don't know. We've not seen him at Championship level, but he might bring a couple of fresh ideas to the table, things like that, and just allow the pressure to be taken off of those two a little bit as well.
Yeah, just for clarity as well. Rob Atkinson, I think the hope is Christmas time. That's what Gerhard said to us after Tuesday night's game, was hope around Christmas time. Obviously, that, to me, from my perspective, presents a bit of a challenge, because there's not loads of training time over Christmas, is there? They play pretty much every 2 days, so it will be hard, you'd imagine, to get him up to speed. Hopefully, he'll be at a position where he can be thrown pretty much straight back in, because that's about 2 months out. But I'd always suggest that they're going to be overly careful with Rob Atkinson, given his history. And I think I assume the defender himself is someone who probably is a bit more careful than other players, which you can totally understand. And I didn't ask about Joe Williams or Luke McNally yesterday. I think for understandable reasons, from my point of view. We've been told by Gerhard Struber on the record multiple times that they won't be featuring this year. Obviously, in McNally's case, I don't think he actually can whatsoever. So, yeah, I think that's one for probably around when we get close to the festive period. That'd be one where that crops up more and more, I'd imagine. So it'd be wrong to suggest that leaves Gerhard Struber with loads of options, Jack, when it heading into Friday night's game. We'll kind of turn our attention to that now. I guess the main talking point is how do you see City line up? How would you like to see them line up? Because I know there's been a few people suggesting formation changes, throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, sort of thing. But what would you do, and what do you think Gerhard Struber would do?
What I would do, mate, is find a magic spell that brings the 9 players back from injury. What I realistically would do is actually not a lot, because I don't think there's a lot we can do. Because you see those formation changes and stuff, but they all end up with someone, with all due respect to him, like Jed Mearholes in the middle, who we've never seen anywhere near this level, because where did we record him from? Aldershot, wasn't it? And that's National League, I think, maybe, hopefully. It's a big jump. That's 4 tiers there that he'd have to suddenly jump up and be starting against Watford. All right, yeah, the argument is you start him, and worst case, he's not good enough or whatever, or he goes under. But that's not exactly going to do great for his confidence. And also, if you start him, I don't think he can then go back out on loan at any point this season, can he? Because you can't play for 3 teams.
I don't know how that works with non-league. That'd be one for someone else to That's one case. I'm not certain, but you might know better than me, Jack. But I've got a feeling from some of the stuff I've seen from some fans and some older shot fans that he might have even been playing this quite often as the left side of one of the back three. Older shot, I think he's played in defence a fair bit. I might be wrong. At which point, it's one thing to ask the lad to step in for a championship game I've never played before. Yeah. It's another to do it in a position he's not probably played loads in this season. I've seen him play 21s football in the middle of the park plenty, so he's obviously capable of playing there, but it would be a risk. I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? It's easy to say, like, go to a back four and do something like that, but they've only had 2 days off. They've had 2 days between games. And I think it's easy to forget that. I imagine we don't see training in and out, but you'd imagine they've basically been training in this simple. It's not been the same system every week, has it? There's been variations of the system. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But it's been very much a case of the structure of having 3 centre halves, 4 across the middle, sort of 2 and 1. It's pretty much. Sometimes it's 2 up top, but most of the time it's structurally the same.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be a major, major risk to suddenly decide to change that with probably what is one day's recovery session really yesterday, and I imagine what will be a very, very light session today to avoid losing anyone else.
Yeah,
I mean, he might well do it. When Gerhard Struber is not going to tell me his team, but I'd be surprised if we suddenly see something that looks completely different.
Yeah, so would I, and I think, like I said, going back to the kids as well. I think Meerholz is a brilliant player from what I've seen of him at 21s and stuff. I think he's a really, really good footballer, but probably not yet. Like you say, it's a big risk if you throw someone like that in. That goes for Morrison, that goes for Thomas, that goes for Peckover, for all of them. It's as great as they might be off the bench, they're probably not ready to start a game of that capacity yet. And I think it would be a little bit strange to make them do so. Like you say, I don't really see a system change. The argument I guess you make is Weiner could drop back then if you have one of them in midfield, but I don't know. I think Weiner's impact in midfield is waning. I think over the last couple of games, but equally no one's been very good over the last 2 games, have they? So I don't think you can really pin that on him. It's not a very great situation to be in, really, is it? If we're working on the basis that obviously Sykes isn't in there and Neto, whilst maybe in contention, might not start, I'd guess. I think it's probably the same 11 with Yu Hirakawa in over Neto, and that's probably it, really. I don't think there's a lot else you can do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've not started, full disclosure, I've not started my predicted team yet. Tomorrow, and in all honesty, I've been putting it off all day because I'm just like, I actually don't know. Like, it sounds awful. I'd love to be able to get it right every time, but this is probably as unsure I've ever been in this job of what to expect, because I think there's a world in which he goes, right, we've lost too many players here. We'll have Twine in the 10, Mehmeti left wing, play Reece up top, and Hirakawa off the right, and we'll go to a 4. There's a world in which that happens, but equally, you're probably going to be in a situation where I think you're going to have Radek in goal. I think that's probably, assuming his legs are right, after that chunk got taken out of it on Tuesday night, which there was no mention of that yesterday. And I'd assume he'll be okay, because I thought it'd be mentioned if he wasn't. I think you'll probably still have Tanner and Dickey. I know he's not always the most popular player, but I think Hayden Roberts probably has to play. I think it's a really interesting debate around him, isn't it? Because I do think there's certain fans, and they're entitled to their opinion, who basically decided they don't like him, and that's they're entitled to that view. I don't think I've seen enough from him over the last year, but equally there was a period where, as the left-sided player, a member of the back three under Liam Manning, when he was playing with some confidence and really found this swagger where he looked all right. I think it's kind of it's a need it's a must rather than a need, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like you've got to play him for me now, because what else do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Is he my first choice? No, he's probably not. He's probably third choice for that, possibly even fourth choice, actually, with all due respect for the left side of that centre that three, sorry. I think you probably have Atkinson, McNally, Pring, and Neto ahead of him in that role if everybody's fit, but they're not.
I'm probably Viner if you could play him there.
Yeah, quite possibly. But realistically, it doesn't matter who I'd have ahead of him because none of them are fit except for Viner. So, yeah, he goes in.
It's an interesting one with Viner, isn't it? Because you could just move him back. You could.
Yeah.
But you're just causing yourself another problem, no? Because who then goes in alongside Randall? And I know that was we don't need to go over the Meerholtz point again as we discussed it. I know there's a few people that have said McCrory goes in there. But I actually think the Sykes injury makes that a really hard decision to make now, doesn't it? Because how would you move Ross McCrory in there when you don't have you say Neto and Mark Sykes are out, it's easy to go, oh, we'll play Yuhir Cow and Elijah Morrison as your wing backs then. And you're like, okay, that feels slightly. You would not have been thrilled if that had been the team that had started at Sheffield United first day of the season, would you? Let's be frank.
No, you'd be very confused.
And if you do that, your ability to change the game off the bench almost vanishes, because your bench, let's say you start you and Morrison, your bench basically consists of Bally and whichever one of Reese or Sinks doesn't start, Peck over Thomas, Max O'Leary, let's say Hayden Roberts, because that Viner's back there, and then Lord knows I can't even think who else, because you're basically knocking down your options further and further, and it's just a really, I don't envy Gerhard Struber, because I think whatever team's named tomorrow, he's going to probably irritate or upset some section of the fan base, isn't he?
Yeah, but ultimately, I suppose there's the argument that that's his job. He doesn't really need to care what we think within reason. If he picks the 11 that he thinks has the best chance of winning the game, then crack on and do it, and hopefully it'll be right. I don't really care what I think if we rock up there and nick a win or even a draw. To be perfectly honest, I'd take tomorrow night. I think it's very, very interesting, because I still don't think we've actually been able to field our best 11 yet this season. Which, when you're in almost mid-November, is quite frustrating. It'll be lovely to see what we're like come February. We might be world beaters.
Well, and that is, I think that's something worth touching on. We said it to Struber yesterday that there is that feeling where you could get to mid-December and this team may be able to kick on because they've got a load of fresh legs. And he was like, "Yeah, that I do." He is, he's quite a charismatic guy. He was pretty much like, "Yeah, but it doesn't solve our problem at the weekend."
No, not
which,
at all.
And you can understand. I think we might have mentioned it earlier, but you can understand. I understand fans frustrated, but I think it'd be naive to think that he's not thinking. I'd imagine thinking exactly the same thing that most fans are, because he's taken over a top 6 squad and been able to probably pick about half of the players that got in the top 6 throughout the season. It must be frustrating for him. He must feel like he's managing slightly with a hand tied behind his back. But that's the situation they find themselves in. And like you say, it's not going to be easy tomorrow, is it? Watford unbeaten at Vicarage Road this season, come into this one off the back of a draw against Ipswich. And I think last weekend they beat Middlesbrough 3-0, which, Borough have been flying under Rob Edwards, haven't they? So plenty of pace in that side. I'm pretty sure they quite like a transition. So I wonder if we could be in for a bit of a ping-pong style game, as Gerhard likes to call them. I'll be honest, when he was just breaking them down to me yesterday and discussing what he felt their strengths were, my initial thought was, this sounds a fair bit like how he described Stoke's way of playing, which, take that what you will.
Yeah, I'm not making the trip because I'm in uni all day. Good old news days with John Palmer, mate. Who can beat him? I'm going to Wrexham and hopefully Portsmouth this year, as long as I don't get stormed on again with a bit of luck. Those who know. Don't need to go into that too much. But yeah, I'll be watching on the telly, and if we get to any sort of ridiculous scoreline, then I shall be going for a beer. I suspect that's the plan anyway.
It's weird though, isn't it? Because, and Gerhard said this to us on Tuesday, they lose and you've lost 3 in a row, haven't won 3 in a row, and you kind of go, oh, this block's been awful, it should have been so much better. They win and they've taken 12 points from 18, won 4 out of 6. In that process, beaten Southampton, beaten Norwich. I know Norwich haven't been good, but before a ball had been kicked, most would have expected them to be up there. Who was the other team they beat? I can't even remember. What was the third? Birmingham. Birmingham again, who most people expected to be up there. And lost.
Themselves were expecting to be up there.
Well, yeah, but they're obviously not. They're not a bad side. They've just won 2 games 4-0, haven't they, back to back, and City dealt with them in the same way that Blackburn probably feel they dealt with Bristol City incredibly comfortably. City did exactly the same thing to Birmingham. So let's not kill ourselves. It's going to be really difficult if they somehow find a way to beat Watford. I think it's been a good block. Question is, how are you going to be able to do that? I think even with a point, it's not a terrible block. 10 out of 18. I think you probably would have taken looking at it when this fixtures came out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost more frustrating the way in which it's happened by winning 3 and then possibly losing 3. Obviously, we don't know yet. But almost if you go loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, it almost feels better because
exactly.
You've sort of it's been more inconsistent, but you've not had the low of right, we've lost 2 or 3 in a row, and you've not had the massive high of we won 3 in a row, we're 2 points off second or whatever it was. It balances itself out a little bit more. So if you, as hard as it is as a football fan, and we all know this, trying to step back and go 9 points from 18 or 9 points from 15 so far, let's say, is a very good block overall. Yeah. If you can go to Watford and get a point or 3, amazing. If not, 9 from 18 still isn't awful. We're still in and around that mix. What are we at the moment? 7th, I think, after Preston won last night.
Yeah.
Goal difference, is it behind Charlton, maybe?
Well, it was on goal difference. It might have changed last night, but it's tight, isn't it? It's so tight, and you only got to look at the results last night to realise, we're still very much in a case of everyone's beating everyone. Southampton under their caretaker won last night. Obviously Norwich dropping points at Sheff Wednesday, and we're quite fortunate to get a point, I think. Judging by the chances, it's wide open. I do think. I think we said it in the podcast before QPR about a month ago now, wasn't it? You getting results in these games is huge because it changes in how everybody feels for the best part of 2 weeks. And if they lose on Friday night, we're going to be doing a podcast reflecting on 3 losses in a row rather than talking about how good 3 wins in a row a month ago were. Had the results been flipped and they'd lost their first 3 after the break and they'd won 3 in a row, we'd probably all be going, "Oh, brilliant! What a great start after a poor, great finish after a poor start." But that's not how it works. We've all got short-term memories in football. Gerhard Struber knows that. The players know that. And they need a result on Friday night, no matter how hard it's going to be. And I think the fan base have been quite balanced, haven't they? They've been understanding of the injury situation, but what starts as frustration bubbles into anger quite quickly. And like you say, if they are to lose at Watford, it's going to make what is already going to be quite a hard game against Swansea even tougher, I think.
Yeah, I think that week after the international break is actually huge because they're 3 big games for fans, big games in terms of atmosphere. Fratton Park's not a nice place to go to, I imagine. And obviously the racecourse ground, Wrexham are going to be back up, aren't they, after the last couple of years? Maybe you spot Deadpool in the crowd, who knows? But that Swansea Wrexham game, obviously you've got, the England Wales type stuff from the crowd. It's, they're got to be big games. They're games where you want to look back at the end of the season and at the start of the season, you look out for them when the fixtures come out. And you look back at them afterwards and go, no matter where you finish, at least we got a result against XYZ because, that's important to fans as well. And the players will know that. Hopefully Struber will know that. I'm sure he managed in similar situations abroad and when he was at Barnsley as well. It'll be an interesting sort of, obviously Friday will be interesting in its own right, but then following that, I think it'll be a very interesting 5 months until the March international break. It feels like so far on this, we've broken it all down into little blocks between each one because of the way the football season's laid out. And then all of a sudden you go November to March football every weekend.
Yeah.
And that's when you need to make the results count.
Yeah, and I think it's worth remembering that's exactly what Liam Manning's side did last year, didn't they? They were actually pretty streaky up until this point, and even up until basically the festive period. Had a really good run, a wobble in January, and then a really good run. Nothing's decided yet. I think that's the long and short of it, isn't it? There's awful lot to play for, and I think it all feel quite miserable if they do lose on Friday night. I do think it's probably worth just taking that step back, regardless of what happens, considering the situation. You can be angry with the situation. I think, fans have every right to be slightly frustrated with the injury situation, as does Gerhard Struber. But I think we've got to kind of all try to take a step back and just think of the bigger picture. But let's not do that now. Let's do a score prediction, because that's more fun than being sensible, I think. So, Jack, what are you expecting at Vicarage Road on Friday night?
Anything better than that 6-0 from lockdown. That'd be nice. If we can avoid something like that, I'll take a point all day long. I want to go 2-2. I reckon we've got some goals in us, because we haven't scored many recently, have we? And I think Mehmeti's interview was very, very interesting, and maybe he's going to pop up with a rocket, hopefully.
Yeah, I can't bring myself to predict a defeat, so I'm gonna 1-1. I think I'd be happy with a point. I think in the grand scheme of things. Is there anything else from your point of view, mate, that you want to touch on there? Or does that pretty much take us to the end, do you think?
I think that is basically everything.
Perfect, mate. Well, as usual, we'll have full coverage from Vicarage Road on Friday night and plenty of reaction over the weekend, I am sure. You can find Jack on YouTube and Twitter, and I'm sure wherever else you look for him, knowing what he's like, he'll be everywhere. We'll have plenty of updates on Bristol Live and the Bristol City Live Facebook and X pages. So until next week, when we probably do a nice reflection break on during the international break, thank you all for listening. Please like, subscribe, rate, whatever it is you do on wherever it is you're listening. And we'll catch you next time.
Cheers, guys.